Whether you're hitting the road or kicking back in the cab, it's time to take a load off with Big Rig Banter. Powered by alltruckjobs.com, your source for finding the trucking jobs drivers really want. Get ready to shift into gear and let the conversations roll.
All right, hello and welcome. The date is February 5th, and you're listening to the 47th episode of Big Rig Banter. I'm your co-host, Troy Diffenderfer.
And I'm your favorite co-host, Lene Rule.
Lene, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Troy, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I want to jump right into our episode pretty quick. We have a really cool interview coming up, and our topic today is side hustles. Lene, do you have any side hustles going on, or have you done side hustles, or can you at least explain to maybe some of our listeners what a side hustle is?
Okay, let me think how to answer that. First, yes, I've done some side hustles. Side hustles are...
Legal side hustles?
Yes. Well,
okay.
Yes, all of mine have been legal.
Okay.
Side hustles are... jobs that you do on the side to make money aside from your main income. So, for example, for me, I'm a creative person. I've always done content writing on the side to earn additional income. Sometimes I work at a local farmer's market at a stand there to make a little money on the side. So those are some of my side hustles. What about you?
I think my biggest side hustle, and I'm going to use this for a free plug, is the fiction writing that I do.
Yeah.
In the last year, I published 2 works of fiction, which you can graciously get on Amazon. Just Google my name or search my name up on Amazon, and you'll find those. So that's probably my biggest side hustle. I've done some freelance marketing and freelance writing like you have in the past, but that's really, and I do sports betting, and I like to think I win more than I lose, so I don't know if that's a side. I can't convince Lid that it's a side hustle.
Is it a side hustle, or is it called gambling addiction?
Well,
we won't even open that.
Yeah, let's not talk
kidding.
about that. But we actually have a fellow podcaster and a truck driver on for today's interview. I'm really excited to talk to Tony Merkel. He hosts a podcast called The Confessionals and an upcoming podcast called Hammer Lane Legends, and his podcast is his side hustle. So, during the day he's doing trucking, and then he's been making a profit from his podcast for the last couple years.
That's really cool. I'm excited to hear about him. But in the meantime, do you guys listening have a side hustle? Let us know on Twitter using hashtag Big Rig Banter.
But yeah, let's jump into Tony's interview and hear how his side hustle's going. All right, I'm here with Tony Merkel from the podcasts The Hammer Lane Legends and the Confessionals podcast. Tony, how are you doing?
Doing great, Troy. How you doing?
Good. So, this episode's all about side hustles. We're talking about different ways that truckers can maybe make some additional income. We've talked about, like Uber and Lyft, or other ways like that in one of our blogs, but you've been making some money podcasting and kind of turned a hobby into definitely something that you're pulling in some money for. So which came first, trucking or podcasting?
Truck driving did. I got my CDL when I was 21 or 22, something like that, and I toyed around with a bunch of different possible career moves in my 20s, and then I got up there pushing 30, and I was like, I need to settle into something. And so I called my dad up one day, and he's a truck driver, and I said, Dad, I need to start driving truck. And so he recommended me for the company that he works for, and I've been driving trailer for Pitt, Ohio, which is an LTL carrier, for I think 7 or 8 years now.
So are you back home every night usually, or are you out for longer periods of time?
Yeah, I'm home every day, so I pedal freight during the day. So there's 2 different shifts at Pitt, Ohio. I know a lot of LTL carriers are very similar, but with Pitt, Ohio, they run their line haul strictly at night, and that's what my dad does. He drives line haul at night, and he just goes from terminal to terminal. And then the guys during the day, like me, we actually make the deliveries and pick up freight and then bring it back to the terminal so the line haul guys can take it out. So I drive during the day, and I'm home every day. I just never know when I'm going to be home. It just, depends on how that day goes.
So then what got you into podcasting?
So I've always been an entrepreneur. So in my early 20s, mid 20s, even late 20s, I was always trying to find something to do entrepreneurial, no matter what I was doing as a full-time job. And what happened is I was driving for Pitt, Ohio, and my wife worked at a college, and she just was having the worst time there. She was there for like 7 or 8 years, something like that. And it got to the point where she was coming home every day and she was crying because it wasn't the greatest environment. And I was getting frustrated and with her work situation for her. And we were also at the same time planning on starting a family soon. Mm-hmm. And we always said that when we started a family, we were going to have her, stay home with the kids, and then, all the money-making duties would be on me. And so I just looked at her one night. It was a Friday night, and we were rebidding at work. And so I had the opportunity to pick something that would give me more hours. And I just looked at her one night, and I just said, quit your job. And she looked at me, and she's like, I can't. And I'm like, trust me, quit your job. We'll start the family, and I'll figure it out. And so she quit her job, and I rebid at work, and I started making more hours, which equals more money. But the writing was on the wall that wasn't going to be able to sustain the household for 2 people, let alone 3 or 4. And so I started thinking and trying to figure out what to do as far as what I could do for extra income. And I actually tried something before podcasting, which was I started a mobile auto repair company called Mars, which stood for Mobile Auto Repair Services. And I would actually make appointments with people, and I'd hustle through my day trying to get out of work so I could get to the customer's house and work on their car in their driveway. And the whole idea was that you could stay at home and watch Saturday morning football with your kids and family, and I'll be working on your car in the driveway so you don't have to sit in the garage.
Nice.
And that was it's still a great idea. It's just being a truck driver, it just did not work with the schedule. And that's when I realized I needed to find something that I could do on the side, but on my own time. And I had a friend that kind of inspired the idea of podcasting. I already had the studio equipment from in my younger days. I did music stuff. And then I knew I could hold conversations with people, and I put the two together, and ta-da, I'm a podcaster.
So how long into podcasting did you start making money? And was that first money-making podcast, The Confessionals?
Yeah. So I started The Confessionals on January 19th, 2017. And the first year of The Confessionals, I didn't make any money at all. And but I had this vision for it. And I knew that this was probably the best opportunity I had to create a side income on my own schedule, being a truck driver. And so I just, I came home every day, didn't matter what time it was from work. I kissed my wife. This was before the kid came along. I ate dinner, and I would go up into the studio, which I made my third bedroom into a studio, and I would work on the podcast stuff. And sometimes I didn't even know what I was working on. I just knew I had to be in a creative environment to find something to do. And so I would sit down at the computer, and I'd find, how do you build a podcast? And the whole first year, I treated it like a job, and I still do. I treat it like a job, even though I wasn't making money. And I put a lot of hours in with not making any money whatsoever. But then, as you build up the audience base and more people were listening, more opportunities were there for advertising, and even, people will pay extra for extra content if they love your show. And so I started doing Patreon at first, then I moved to memberships strictly on my website. But I think I started making money the second year, probably 2, 3, 4 months into the second year, I started making money through the Patreon. But it was a lot of hustle and grind to get there. But, hindsight 2020, it was 100% worth it.
That's what I was going to say. It sounds like you've been side hustling from day one. What are maybe some other side hustles you'd recommend? I know we mentioned a handful for truckers, whether it's, like Uber or selling something they might have created on Etsy or something like that, or, YouTubing. There's definitely tons of side hustles for truckers out there, even ones that are, might be on the road the majority of the time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. One thing that people, whether you're a trucker or not, you have to understand is that it's 2020, and there's no reason why you don't have a side hustle going if you want one. Because 20, 30 years ago, it was a lot harder to do things as a trucker to make extra income. But now with technology, you're really limitless as to what you can do. And so I think a lot of times truckers, we tend to feel, because it becomes very mundane. We know what we're doing. It becomes very vanilla. The thrill of, hey, I'm a trucker, it kind of fades after a while. And you forget that what you do is very unique and very difficult. And a lot of people that aren't truckers glamorize the industry in the sense that they're like, wow, you're a trucker, you drive those things? Wow, that's impressive. They get very impressed with the idea of it. And so just taking that, you can surely turn a YouTube channel where you literally, get a couple of cameras and you set them up in your truck, one facing you, one facing the road, one facing maybe clipped to your mirror and facing behind you on both sides. So let's just say you have 4 cameras, one facing the road, 2 on both sides facing behind you or something, and one facing you. And you just document your life out on the road. And you get all that footage and you just learn how to chop it up. There's free programs. I run with Max, and I have free programs with that, but I'm sure PC is the same thing. There's free programs where you can actually, upload your video footage, chop it up, edit it down into, 15, 20-minute thing, and put it out there for the world to see. And then you join Facebook groups that are trucker groups, and you just drop the link to your YouTube video in there, and you just keep working on the craft. And when you first start, you're going to get a few hits, and that's it. And you're like, oh man, it's not taking off. But the consistency, and that's one of the biggest things that people have to understand, is that you have to be consistent with the side hustle. Mm-hmm. The audience needs to know when you're going to drop something new. So whether you do a new video every week, every 2 weeks, or once a day, the audience wants to know when to expect you. And if you remain consistent, the more consistent you are, the more they're going to come back. But also, the more consistent you are, the better you're going to get. The quality of your stuff's going to get better. All of a sudden, you're going to realize, hey, I'm chopping these videos up, but the audio's not that great. How do I fix that? And you start figuring out, and you look into the audio stuff, and you learn how to fix your audio, and all of a sudden you have a YouTube channel that is documenting your life as a trucker, and it has 500, 1,000 people following. You're excited, but it just keeps growing and growing, because this kind of stuff, once you get it going, it gets a life of its own. It gets its own momentum. It's like a snowball going down the hill, and eventually you're going to get to the point where you couldn't stop it if you wanted to. And so it's just taking that first few steps of actually going out there and doing something, finding something that you're interested in, and then pursuing it, especially when you have no idea what the outcome's going to be. And that's one of the hardest things to get through, is the idea that, hey, when I punch in at my job, whether, I'm punching in or getting in my truck and I'm driving across the country, I know what the end game is. I know that if I work 10 hours today, I make this much money. I know if I drive this many miles today, I make this much money. But when you're doing a side hustle and building something from the ground up, you're not guaranteed anything. And that can be kind of scary and deterring for people. But I'm telling you, if you're even thinking about doing a side hustle in today's day and age, now is the best time to do it than ever before. And you have the best chance of actually building something on the side today than you ever did in human history. It's that easy. It's just taking the steps and doing it. So the technology side of things is there. And even if you have, certain things that you make on the side, like I have this one guy who, when he's home, he makes throwing knives, and he's a blacksmith, and he makes throwing knives at his house. And what he does now is he takes the throwing knives, he posts them on Instagram, he started getting a following, and he starts selling these things. And it's just a matter of taking something that you enjoy doing and pursuing it, especially in the beginning when you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel.
So when you get this, snowball rolling and your side hustle up and running, how do you manage your work-life balance, with not only your work, obviously, but with the side hustle as well?
Yeah, and that's difficult. It really is difficult. So initially, it takes a lot of dedication on your end to know that, hey, I just put in 14-hour day at work. I maxed out on my hours. I'm tired, but I got to do something on the side. I know I got to build something. And so you got to force yourself to put in even more time on something else where you're treating it like a job, even though you're not even making money at it yet. And then on top of it, you have the family life. A lot of guys are married or have kids. And especially with the kid thing, it gets hard because especially once that snowball gets going and stuff, and you really have some momentum going, it requires more of your attention. So for me personally, my wife has been very supportive in the side hustle. And even through my failures, I've tried a lot of different things. I've in my 20s, I started a cleaning service company. I joined the Amway company in my early 20s, just trying to do something. I did the mobile auto repair services. I've done a lot of different things. And she supported me through all of it. And this last one, which was the podcasting industry, she was a little hesitant because we've been through a lot as far as me doing side hustles that failed. And I told her, I said, listen, if this doesn't work, if this doesn't hit, I'll just give it up. I'll just stick to just pure dedication to driving itself. And she's like, okay, she'll take that. And then it started growing, and it started taking a lot of time because it was growing. And for me, what I did was I included my wife in on the process. And so I told her, I was like, listen, you're staying at home. I'm out on the road driving. And we were getting these emails coming in with people's experiences, because my first podcast is a paranormal podcast where people share their paranormal experiences with me. It's a storytelling podcast. And I didn't have time to run through these emails and schedule everything. And so she started doing that for me, and I included her in the process. So she didn't feel like she was on the outside looking in and just seeing her husband disappear into an office for the night talking to complete strangers. It became something that she was helping with the process and actually initiating the process of me talking to these people. And so she is now very involved with what I do and essentially works for the podcast. And so that's huge. And then with the kids and stuff, it still breaks my heart when every time I got to go in the studio. Like this past weekend, I spent a lot of time in the studio. I mean, probably about 10 to 12 hours between the two shows. And, you know, my kid's not in here because he's too loud. He's young. But it's a matter of when I'm around him, engaging with him and letting him know Daddy loves him. And when I come upstairs, I say the same thing to him that I do when I'm going to drive my truck every morning. I say, all right, buddy, Daddy's going to work. So he knows that I'm not going upstairs just to play around and get away from him, but I'm actually going to work to do something. And so he can identify in his little mind that Daddy's going to work. And that's how I kind of balance it out and stuff. It may not be the perfect system, but it's working for me.
So if you could, would you make your side hustle your full-time job? I know we were talking earlier. I know you have plans to expand some things, and if you want to keep them under wraps, I totally respect that. But is that something you would love to do? Maybe just do podcasts full-time?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And when I first started this, it wasn't even an option to even fathom. Like, I mean, you could dream about it. Oh, man, how cool would it be if I just woke up every day and sat down in my studio and that was my job to podcast. But it wasn't a reality. And now it's becoming more and more a reality that if I just keep going the way I'm going, it's eventually going to happen. And that is now a goal of mine because truckers know that you spend a lot of time away from home, whether you're an LTL guy like me putting in 12 to 14 hours a day, or you're an over-the-road guy. Both drivers have to make sacrifices when it comes to the family. And I don't know one driver out there that says that he doesn't want to be around his kids more. And so the idea of me doing something like this full time and having very flexible schedule where when the kid gets older and he has a basketball game, I can just say, okay, I'll be there because I can be. That's very attractive to me, and being more engaged with his development as a young man. And so, yeah, making podcasting a full-time gig is definitely now on the table as a goal of mine. And the way I'm doing that is obviously building my first podcast, The Confessionals, to bigger and better levels. I'm constantly working on it. Before we did this interview, I was working on it. And then what I started doing was I started thinking, there's a lot of other things I can do with podcasting. And so we're starting Hammer Lane Legends, which is a trucker podcast. Me and my dad are doing it together. I'm pretty good at talking with people and having conversation, and I learned that from my dad. When I was a kid growing up, we would sit at the table and talk. That's what we did. We didn't sit around the TV watching TV. We talked as a family. And so holding conversation is something that I'm good at, and he is as well. So we actually this past weekend did our first set of interviews for Hammer Lane Legends, and I can't tell you how smooth it was. Our chemistry from the dinner table transitioned right behind the microphones.
Awesome.
And it was fantastic. And so we got that going, and now my wife is going to be launching her own podcast, which is kind of like similar to what I've been doing with the paranormal type stuff, only what she's doing is she's taking written thriller, scary type stories, and she's going to narrate them and act them out behind the microphone. I'll produce the audio and produce it so it sounds very engaging. And then we're going to call that the Hour After Midnight. And so very busy, launching a lot of new podcasts this year. But I very much believe that we get one shot at this life, and I don't like living with regrets. Every second that goes by, we can't get back, and we got to stop acting like tomorrow's guaranteed to us. And so I live in the moment, and I truly pursue life to the fullest that I possibly can. And if I fail at it, I'm okay with it because I know I at least tried. But the idea of not trying and never knowing if I would have done good or bad, that is something I can't live with, and it scares me, to be honest with you.
Awesome, Tony. I love and respect that passion, and you're really setting a great example of being a side hustler and things like that. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just go ahead, and right now the only website I have active is theconfessionalspodcast.com. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you think that maybe, hey, it's kind of interesting to hear people's paranormal, scary type stories that they actually personally went through, you can go ahead and check it out, or any podcast player, it's on there. Just look the confessionals up. And Hammer Lane Legends is looking to come out soon. We have more interviews scheduled. We're trying to drop it late February, early March is the shot for that. And we actually have an interview with an ice road trucker from the TV show that we're doing in 2 weeks from now. So that should be a pretty entertaining stories that he has. But Hammer Lane Legends is essentially truckers coming on, talking shop, and sharing wild experiences that they've had from the road. And it's not just truckers. We'll have police officers on, EMTs, people who drive for a living, coming on and just sharing what it's like doing what they do and what are the wild and crazy experiences they've been through.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And once again, that's Tony Merkel from Hammer Lane Legends and the Confessionals podcast. Tony, thank you so much.
Awesome, Troy. Thank you.
All right. And a big thanks to Tony for that interview. Make sure to check out the Confessionals podcast as well as Hammer Lane Legends when it comes out. And if you're still interested in some more side hustle options, we did write a blog on alltruckjobs.com going over some other side hustle options that we think you might be interested in.
Yeah, and don't forget that this podcast is brought to you by alltruckjobs.com. If you are interested, we do have sponsorship opportunities for Big Rig Banter, so shoot us an email and we can get you some of that information.
Yeah, and again, we always ask for you to leave a review wherever you're listening to this. We really appreciate any feedback you guys can provide. But I think that about wraps it up, Lene.
Sounds good. I think so.
All right, I'm your co-host, Troy Diffenderfer.
And I'm your favorite co-host, Lene Rule.
And this is Big Rig Banter.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Big Rig Banter. For your next job, check out alltruckjobs.com, the premier online source for finding the best driver jobs in the country. Browse hundreds of positions by freight or driver type to get back on the road with confidence. Click subscribe to keep the conversations coming. Until next time on Big Rig Banter.